The night began like any other in the glittering world of late-night television. The lights burned bright, the applause thundered, and America tuned in expecting laughter and light-hearted banter. But what unfolded that evening was not comedy. It was combat. Yes, you clicked because Jimmy Kimmel humiliated Stephen Colbert on live television, leaving him stunned into silence. And the truth is, it happened in a way no one could have predicted. On paper, it should have been harmless. Two seasoned veterans of late-night comedy sharing a stage, exchanging jokes, perhaps poking fun at politicians, celebrities, and the endless absurdities of the news cycle. Colbert, with his razor wit and politically charged satire, versus Kimmel, with his quick sarcasm and knack for cutting humor. It had all the makings of a friendly duel. But underneath the glossy studio lights was something darker. Years of rivalry, whispers of ratings wars, and questions about who truly owned the crown of late-night television. When the cameras rolled, it became clear this wasn't going to be a comedy sketch. It was going to be a showdown. It started innocently enough. Colbert cracked a joke about Washington lobbyists, drawing polite laughter. Kimmel smirked and countered with a jab about billionaires running Hollywood. The audience chuckled, but it was clear the energy was shifting. "You know, Stephen," Kimmel said slyly, "I think you spent so much time lecturing America, you've forgotten how to make them laugh." The audience erupted, half with laughter, half with gasps. It wasn't a joke. It was a jab. Colbert froze for half a beat, his smile faltering. Then he shot back, voice dripping with controlled disdain. "At least my punchlines aren't written by interns scrolling celebrity gossip." The crowd groaned and laughed nervously. The atmosphere shifted. This wasn't scripted banter. This was personal. For years, insiders whisper about the quiet hostility between the two. Colbert had built his empire on political satire, often painting himself as the moral voice of late night. Kimmel leaned into raw humor and heart, presenting himself as a relatable everyman. Both styles had their followings, but both men knew there was only so much audience to share. Behind the scenes, network executives kept track of every rating, every viral clip, every advertiser's dollar. The competition wasn't just about jokes. It was about influence, prestige, and money. That night, the rivalry spilled into the open. The conversation shifted to money and politics, a theme Colbert loved. He spoke passionately about corruption, lobbying, and corporate power. His words were sharp, his delivery polished. Then Kimmel cut him off. His tone was mocking, almost playful, but the sting was unmistakable. "That's cute, Stephen. You rail against billionaires while cashing checks from the same corporations you mock. Tell me, does the hypocrisy taste better when it's served with a CBS logo on it?" The audience gasped. For once, Colbert had no snappy comeback. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and adjusted his papers nervously. Silence. The silence was deafening. Kimmel leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. The crowd roared, not with laughter this time, but with shock. That silence was more powerful than any punchline. For the first time in years, Stephen Colbert, the man who built his reputation dismantling politicians, pundits, and public figures, sat speechless. And the humiliation wasn't just personal. It was professional. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Late night wasn't just about entertainment anymore. It was a billion-dollar business, tied to advertisers, streaming platforms, and viral clips that lived forever online. Every moment mattered. Every humiliation was magnified. And Kimmel had just landed one of the most devastating blows in late-night history. The audience erupted. Some clapping, some booing, many gasping in disbelief. Social media exploded within seconds. Clips of the exchange began circulating before the show even went off the air. Hashtags like hashtag Kimmel versus Colbert, hashtag Colbert silenced, and hashtag late night humiliation trended worldwide. What had started as a comedy bit had become something else. A cultural moment. The gladiators of late night had gone to war, and Jimmy Kimmel had struck first blood. But as powerful as that silence was, it raised questions no one could answer in the moment. Would Colbert strike back? Would Kimmel double down? And how would the media, politicians, and rivals exploit this crack in facade of late-night unity? Because one thing was clear, this wasn't over. And what came next would not just change the careers of two comedians. It would shake the foundations of late-night television itself. The silence lingered in the studio like smoke after an explosion. Stephen Colbert's lips moved, but no words came out. The man who had dismantled presidents and pulverized pundits with razor-sharp wit suddenly sat in stunned quiet, while Jimmy Kimmel smirked across the stage, savoring the rare role reversal. This was the moment America would remember, but it wasn't over. Not even close. Because once a crack appears in the armor, the blows that follow land twice as hard. And Kimmel knew it. The studio audience, usually a guaranteed laugh track, had become something else entirely. A courtroom gallery. Some gasped in shock. Others laughed nervously, clapping for Kimmel's audacity. A woman in the third row whispered just loud enough for microphones to catch. "Oh my God, he got him." That whisper, amplified online, became a rallying cry. Clips with captions like, "Kimmel finally shuts Colbert up," spread like wildfire across social media. And Kimmel, sensing the shift, pressed forward, leaning back in his chair with mock innocence. Kimmel tilted his head and added fuel to the fire. "What's wrong, Stephen? Cat got your tongue? Or is it the corporate lawyers in your earpiece telling you to be careful?" The audience erupted in laughter. Even Colbert's own fans couldn't deny it. He looked rattled. For once, Jimmy Kimmel wasn't the butt of the joke. He was the one delivering it. Colbert inhaled sharply, straightened his suit, and forced a smile. He tried to regain ground with his usual sharp edge. "Oh, please, Jimmy. You wouldn't know corporate hypocrisy if it bit you in the—" But before he could finish, Kimmel cut him off. Fast, precise, like a boxer jabbing before the knockout punch. "You mean the way you rail against billionaires one night, then fly private with them the next? That kind of hypocrisy." The crowd gasped again. Colbert froze. Kimmel leaned in, voice steady, almost gleeful. "Let's be honest, Stephen. You built a career pretending to be the people's champion. But behind the cameras, you're just another Hollywood insider cashing checks from the very people you mock. That's not comedy. That's theater. And the joke's on your audience." The silence after that line was heavy. The crowd didn't know whether to clap or boo. Some sat with their mouths open. Colbert, visibly flustered, shuffled the papers on his desk, searching for a lifeline. But there was none. It was subtle at first. A few audience members clapped timidly for Kimmel's attack. Then more joined. Soon, a wave of applause rolled through the studio. For the first time in years, Colbert wasn't leading the crowd. He was losing it. And in late-night television, losing the room is worse than losing the argument. Kimmel, emboldened, went for the kill with humor, so sharp it cut Colbert's credibility to pieces. "I mean, Stephen, your show is basically a TED Talk with a laugh track. Half the time I can't tell if I should laugh or take notes." The crowd roared. Even some of Colbert's writers, sitting offstage, were seen covering their mouths. Colbert blinked, stunned. His trademark smirk faltered, his confidence shaken. For once, he looked ordinary. Online, the moment was being clipped and shared at lightning speed. Memes appeared within minutes. Colbert's stunned face captioned, "When the roast master gets roasted." Kimmel holding an imaginary mic, followed by the phrase, "mic drop." TikTok loops replaying Colbert's silence under dramatic courtroom music. By midnight, hashtags like hashtag Colbert silenced, hashtag Kimmel mic drop, and hashtag late night humiliation were trending worldwide. The internet had already delivered its verdict. But Colbert wasn't about to surrender. His pride, his reputation, and perhaps his entire late-night empire were on the line. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, voice hardening. "So that's your game, Jimmy? Come on my stage, throw cheap shots, and hope it goes viral? Congratulations, you've turned comedy into clickbait." The crowd cheered at his defiance. For a moment, Colbert seemed to claw back control. But Kimmel didn't flinch. He smiled, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. "Clickbait? Stephen, I don't need clickbait. I just need you to answer one simple question. Why is it that every time you talk about corruption, you're sitting next to it?" The audience howled. Colbert went pale. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It was an exposure, a humiliation. Colbert, the man who had silenced politicians with satire, was himself silenced, live, before millions. He fumbled with his notes, chuckled awkwardly, and looked toward the band for a cue. None came. The audience sensed it. They weren't watching comedy anymore. They were watching a gladiator fall. By now, the fallout was clear. This wasn't just another late-night moment. It was a crack in the facade of the entire industry. If Colbert could be humiliated so publicly, what did it say about the power dynamics of late night? About its future? About the money and influence that fueled it? The stakes weren't just personal anymore. They were systemic, and Kimmel wasn't finished. As the segment wrapped, Colbert attempted to transition to a commercial, his voice shaky. But before the cameras cut, Kimmel leaned toward his mic and delivered one final zinger that left the audience shrieking. You wanted a guest, Stephen. What you got was a lesson. The crowd erupted. Colbert sat frozen, stunned into silence. And at that moment, America knew. Jimmy Kimmel had just rewritten the rules of late-night comedy. The broadcast wasn't even over before the fallout began. Phones buzzed, hashtags surged, and clips of the exchange spread like wildfire across every corner of the internet. By the time Colbert's credits rolled, the narrative had already escaped his control. Jimmy Kimmel hadn't just delivered a joke. He had detonated a bomb in the middle of late-night television. Morning headlines screamed the story in bold letters. Jimmy Kimmel silences Colbert. Humiliation on live TV. Colbert stunned into silence. Kimmel's verbal knockout goes viral. Late-night showdown. Who owns the stage? Cable news anchors replayed the clip on loop, dissecting every frame like analysts reviewing game footage. CNN called it a rare and unfiltered moment of power shifting on live television. Fox News, seizing the opportunity, ran it under the banner. Colbert exposed by his own hypocrisy. On MSNBC, a panelist shook her head. We're not just talking about comedy anymore. This was a cultural clash, a populist voice embarrassing an elitist one. Late-night comedy had become headline news. Public reaction was instant and brutal. Online polls showed a decisive swing toward Kimmel. Memes flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Colbert staring blankly. Caption, when you get roasted with your own material. Kimmel holding an imaginary gavel. The words case closed. Split screens of famous courtroom defeats with Colbert's stunned expression pasted in. On YouTube, reaction videos piled up by the hour. Fans laughing, influencers breaking down the exchange, body language experts analyzing Colbert's nervous gestures. One viral video, titled "The Exact Second Colbert Lost a Crowd," hit 3 million views overnight. The audience had chosen its victor. Inside CBS, executives scrambled. Ratings for the episode were high, but the headlines were brutal. Colbert's team released a statement insisting the exchange had been lighthearted and part of the spirit of comedy. But the public wasn't buying it. Clips of Colbert fumbling for words didn't look lighthearted. They looked devastating. On his next show, Colbert attempted to brush it off with humor. Yes, Jimmy had a good night. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. The audience laughed politely, but the sting lingered. Online, critics mocked the attempt. When your comeback takes 24 hours, you've already lost. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel seized the moment. On his own show, he played the clip of Colbert's silence 3 times in a row, milking the audience's laughter. Look, I love Stephen, Kimmel joked, grinning. But when I said CBS stands for Can't Be Spontaneous, I wasn't kidding. The crowd roared. It was a masterstroke, keeping the tone light but twisting the knife. Kimmel had turned the humiliation into a victory lap. The spectacle was too big for other media figures to ignore. Bill Maher, ever the cynic, weighed in during his monologue. I've made a career out of mocking hypocrisy. Watching Kimmel do it to Colbert was like watching a student finally beat the teacher. Brutal. Delicious. Sunny Hassan on The View pushed back. I don't see delicious. I see cruelty. There's nothing funny about silencing another comedian. Comedy should challenge power, not tear down peers for sport. Maher quickly fired back online. Sonny, if you think Stephen Colbert is powerless, you've clearly never seen his contract. The feud expanded. What had started as a duel between two men was now an all-out war across platforms. Even politicians couldn't resist. One senator tweeted, "Stephen Colbert just got a taste of his own medicine. Maybe Hollywood elites should try listening for once instead of lecturing." A progressive congresswoman countered. Kimmel got a laugh, but Colbert has a legacy. Don't confuse a viral moment with real influence. And just like that, the confrontation became a metaphor for America itself. Populism versus elitism, authenticity versus artifice. Behind the scenes, money flowed. Advertisers flocked to clips of the confrontation, pouring ad dollars into both CBS and ABC. Analysts on Wall Street noted the spike in viewership and called it a rare moment of late-night liquidity. It was cynical, but undeniable. Humiliation had become a profitable currency, and the networks knew it. Quietly, rival producers began brainstorming ways to engineer their own Kimmel moment. Was this the future of late night, manufacturing viral takedowns for profit? For Stephen Colbert, the damage was deeper than numbers. His reputation had always been his shield. The man too sharp to be outwitted, too clever to be cornered. But now, America had seen the impossible. Colbert left speechless. Critics pounced. One op-ed in The Atlantic read, "For the first time, Colbert wasn't the one writing the narrative. He was the story, and not in the way he wanted." Even loyal fans admitted it. Their hero had been humbled. As the week dragged on, one question dominated the conversation. Would Colbert strike back, or would the humiliation define him? Kimmel was riding high. Colbert was on the defensive, and the entire late-night landscape was trembling. Rival hosts were circling. Networks were cashing in. Audiences were hungry for more. The stage was set for a rematch, a confrontation that would decide not just who won the argument, but who owned the very soul of late-night television. Because what America had witnessed wasn't just one man silenced. It was the empire of late-night shaken to its core. The air in late-night television had changed. Colbert's stunned silence was still replaying across every platform, and Kimmel's victory lap only deepened the wound. Yet, for all the laughter and viral memes, there was unfinished business. Everyone knew it. Colbert couldn't let his humiliation stand. America demanded a rematch, and CBS, smelling ratings gold, arranged one. A week later, Colbert announced with a tight smile that Jimmy Kimmel would return to The Late Show. The booking alone sent shockwaves through the media. Was Colbert trying to reclaim his dominance? Or was CBS simply exploiting the spectacle for another rating spike? The night arrived. The audience buzzed with nervous excitement, aware they were about to witness history. The cameras rolled. Colbert opened with an uncharacteristically direct line. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back Jimmy Kimmel, the man who left me speechless." The crowd erupted in applause. Kimmel walked out grinning, waving like a prize fighter stepping back into the ring. From the moment Kimmel sat down, the tension was palpable. Colbert, eager to regain control, tried to set the tone with sharp wit. "You know, Jimmy, last time you were here, you had the internet convince you beat me. Congratulations on your 15 minutes of glory." Kimmel chuckled, leaning back. 15 minutes? "Stephen, you've been repeating the same joke for 15 years. I just did what no politician ever could. I shut you up." The audience roared. Colbert flinched. Round two had begun, determined to avoid another loss. Colbert went straight for Kimmel's vulnerabilities. "You call me a hypocrite, Jimmy, but let's not pretend you're some kind of saint. Half your monologues are just Hollywood gossip with punchlines. That's not bravery. That's babysitting the audience." The crowd clapped loudly. Colbert smirked. For a moment, it felt like he'd seized back the advantage. But Kimmel wasn't finished. With a grin, Kimmel pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, a printed copy of Colbert's ratings chart. "You're right, Stephen. I'm no saint. But at least I'm not losing viewers every month while pretending to be America's conscience." Gasps filled the studio. The camera zoomed in on Colbert's face, tight, pale, jaw clenched. Kimmel waved the paper like a trophy. "The truth is, you're not mad I roasted you. You're mad because, For one night, the audience realized they don't need to tell them what to think. The applause was deafening. Colbert tried to speak, but the words faltered. His lips trembled. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Kimmel leaned in, finishing him off with one last zinger. "Stephen, you spent years teaching America how to laugh at politicians. Tonight, I taught America how to laugh at you." The crowd exploded. Some rose to their feet. The band played a sharp riff, as if punctuating the blow. For the second time, Stephen Colbert, the master of sharp comebacks, sat in stunned silence. Humiliated, the clip went viral within minutes, breaking the internet in ways few late-night moments ever had. Headlines screamed, "Kimmel destroys Colbert again, this time with proof." Colbert Speechless, Part 2. The new king of late night. Polls showed overwhelming support for Kimmel. Memes turned Colbert's silence into the symbol of defeat. But beyond the laughs and the numbers, something deeper was happening. Critics began to ask, what did this mean for late-night comedy itself? Was the era of scripted satire giving way to raw, unscripted combat? An op-ed in the New York Times declared, Colbert's silence wasn't just a personal defeat. It was a symbolic collapse of late-night's authority. The audience no longer wants lectures. They want authenticity, even if it comes with humiliation. For Colbert, it was a bruising blow to his legacy. For Kimmel, it was a coronation. But for the industry, it was a wake-up call. What America saw wasn't just two comedians trading barbs. It was a reflection of something larger, a culture exhausted by elitism, hungry for authenticity, and unafraid to cheer when the mighty fall. Kimmel's victory wasn't just about jokes. It was about exposing the performance behind the performance. And in that exposure, audiences found something refreshing. Truth hidden inside comedy. In his next monologue, Kimmel ended with a line that summed it all up. Comedy is supposed to be about honesty. And sometimes honesty stings. But if you can't laugh at yourself, you probably don't deserve to laugh in the first place. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Colbert, watching from across the industry, stayed silent. And so the curtain fell on one of the most dramatic confrontations in late-night history. Not with a punchline, but with a question America is still asking. When the comedians become the joke, who really wins? The host, the guest, or the audience?